At the beginning of the movie, several new prisoners are seen arriving at the prison where they will serve their sentences. The main character, Manuel, is wearing an expensive suit when he first enters. He sees a young inmate named Ruby, who seems to have lost his way in life. Soon, the guards arrive and treat Ruby rudely. Manuel tries to protest but is instead beaten by one of the guards. Manuel was then transferred to an examination room for several weeks on the grounds of checking whether or not he had an infectious disease. While there, he was only provided with a small bucket every day. At night, Manuel had trouble sleeping because many small insects bit him. This condition made him want to protest against the prison authorities. A few days later, Manuel met a prisoner named Negri, who was in charge of distributing food. At that time, Negri gave him 3 cigarettes. However, Manuel protested again because he needed not cigarettes or food but a shower. The warden, who heard the complaint, initially seemed to respond but instead responded by brutally beating Manuel. After 3 weeks, Manuel was finally transferred to a detention cell. The conditions there were full of prisoners. Only one person greeted him from a distance, Negri. Negri invited Manuel to stay in his room. In the room, there was also a senior prisoner named Pino, who was quite feared. Pino had a habit of reading on his bed. Manuel also tried to get acquainted with him. A few days later, the prisoners had the opportunity to meet with their relatives. His wife and children visited Negri. Meanwhile, Manuel was visited by his girlfriend, Lucia. Lucia said that no matter what, she would always support Manuel and never feel ashamed of having a girlfriend like him. After that, the prisoners gathered in the field to do some activities. However, misfortune befell Manuel again. An influential inmate named mrbear and his group harassed and beat him up. Manuel then protested with the warden, but the warden said that in order to protest, he had to pay first.
No hay democracia.
A little while later, an inmate named Andreas came along and intended to help Manuel. Andreas brought Manuel to his group of intellectuals. Among them was Boni, a doctor who successfully treated Manuel. Apart from Boni, there were also inmates named Martin and Augustine. Boni offered Manuel the opportunity to join a resistance association group, which was formed to fight against the injustices often committed by the guards. This group aimed to fight for amnesty or freedom when there was a change of leadership in the country. However, Manuel refused the offer to join the association. A few days later, Negri invited Manuel to meet with his friend who was in charge of the work at the prison. Negri introduced Manuel to mrbear, the person who had previously bothered Manuel. Even so, Manuel tried to accept the situation because he also needed money. Besides, Manuel had time to ask about who Pino really was. Negri also told him that Pino was involved in a robbery case and had killed 2 policemen. Because of that, even the notoriously cruel wardens did not dare to touch him. When Manuel was in his cell, there was a commotion outside with shouts of amnesty, amnesty. The next day, while in the field, Boni came to Manuel again, claiming to be checking his teeth. However, Boni asked Manuel to write down some resistance messages. That night, Manuel stayed awake and wrote down the resistance messages until he finally fell asleep. A few days later, the prisoners outside the cells were seen gathering. Here, Negri poured out his heart about his longing for his family. Negri kept calculating how much longer he would be in prison, considering he had been sentenced to 20 years. This continued into the night when Manuel heard Negri crying. Negri realized that he could only get out of prison when he was 57 years old. The next day, Manuel and Pino were surprised to hear a commotion outside the cell. It turned out that the warden had arrested a man named Emilio. Not only that, but Negri was also caught and thrown into an isolation room on charges that he was involved in digging to escape from the prison. The next day, the warden came to Manuel and Pino's room to inform them that they would clear Negri's belongings, as he had died of a heart attack. However, all the inmates realized that it was just a lie from the warden. This made the other inmates respond by fighting the warden. Manuel saw this opportunity to throw the writings of resistance that he had made in front of the cell room, even throwing them outwards. At that moment, Manuel noticed Pino's seemingly ordinary response and emotionally asked why Pino could behave that way. His actions led to him being put in solitary confinement. However, Manuel's writing eventually paid off. A lawyer named Salsona managed to read the writings and intended to help Manuel in the trial process, which until then had not been processed. Then, the Resistance Association, especially Agustin, explained that Negri's death was a sign to start a bigger movement. From there, Boni got the idea to force the prison authorities to allow the media to enter. He devised a stunt in which the prisoners slashed their own hands and created a commotion while demanding the media's presence. The action was successful, and the head warden finally granted their request. The media was allowed in, and paramedics were brought in to treat the prisoners. The movement inside the prison came into the spotlight and became widely known to the public, even triggering support from outside movements that opposed the dilapidated system. Shortly thereafter, Pino was moved to join the Resistance Association. This was good news for the group members, as they knew Pino had a strong influence and a terrible reputation. Pino's first move was to expel a traitorous inmate who had been leaking information to the warden. Time went on until June 1977. Elections were about to be held. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Manuel, Boni, and Pino tried to invite Marbella to join the Resistance Association. Pino immediately went to see Marbella and made the invitation. Marbella initially refused because he felt he was satisfied with the facilities he enjoyed while in prison. But Pino did not give up. He showed him the ring he was wearing, which turned out to belong to Marbella's son. Pino revealed that Marbella's son had died at the hands of the wardens on the orders of the head warden. Hearing this, Marbella was finally shaken and immediately agreed to join the fight. The wardens began to sniff out Pino and Manuel's movements. To weaken them, the wardens launched an attack by burning all of Pino's belongings. However, Marbella's entry into the association made their strength even greater. The resistance grew stronger. One of the big actions began when a prisoner pretended to have convulsions to trick the warden. After that, they created a commotion by burning rooms inside the prison. This incident caused a stir throughout the city and actually attracted sympathy and support from the community for the prisoners who were resisting. After negotiations with Sassona, Boni was transferred from prison after agreeing to accept a reduced sentence by stopping the resistance. The inmates jeered at Boni's decision to surrender. Manuel was asked to sign the prison transfer file with the threat of an additional 10-year sentence if he refused. However, Manuel refused the offer. Before being transferred, Manuel met Lucia to inform her that he would be transferred. That night, Manuel and Pino were kidnapped by a group of people and transferred to another prison. As soon as they arrived, they immediately faced even worse cruelty. The wardens continued to beat them relentlessly. After being tortured for some time, Manuel and Pino took the extreme step of deliberately swallowing a bolt so that a doctor could examine them in the hope that their torture would stop. The plan worked, and they were transferred back to their previous prison. On their return, the prisoners greeted them enthusiastically, like heroes. Manuel immediately went to see Marbella, and there, an inmate showed Marbella the prison's sewer. Suddenly, Ruby came, and for no apparent reason, he finished off Marbella. After that, Ruby gave Manuel some money to keep quiet and not reveal what happened. A few months later, the inmates, including Manuel, were faced with harsh reality once again. The amnesty that Sassona fought for was rejected by the court, leaving the inmates feeling hopeless. They vented their frustration by setting fire to the rooms inside the prison again. Manuel also vented his anger by attacking one of the head wardens, showing how frustrated he and the other inmates were. After the incident, Pino saw Manuel becoming more and more desperate and finally revealed a secret. Pino invited Manuel to see the old elevator that was no longer in use in the prison. Inside, they could observe all the prison's activities. Pino then showed them the sewer that was connected to the highway, but they had to dig it to reach it. Manuel asked one of the inmates to play soccer on the field so that the warden would not hear the sound of digging. He also invited other inmates to join the escape mission. The digging process continued, and after more than 20 days, they finally found a crack leading to the sewer. When the day of escape arrived, Manuel and Pino were careful to read the situation because this was a crucial moment for them. They changed their clothes so they could blend in like ordinary people. After successfully escaping through the sewer, they continued their escape with other prisoners, although some were caught. After splitting up, Manuel went to see his girlfriend, Lucia, who had faithfully waited for him while he was in prison. Lucia was moved when she saw Manuel arrive. The film ends with photos depicting the real events and ends there.